We're going to be talking about healing the cycle of violence. I would like to bring up to the stage Dr. Darryl Tonemah. Let's give him a round of applause. And as he's walking up, just a reminder, after his keynote address, we will be going into our breakout sessions, which you can find in your programs. Widow.
How do I change them?
They'll do it for you.
Okay.
Right over there.
Good afternoon. Oh, there it is. Good afternoon. My name is Darryl Tonemah. I'm Kiowa, Comanche, and Tuscarora. My family's from Mears, down near Mears. Is there a Mearser here? Did you bring a burger? I was born on the Tuscarora res in New York. My mom is Tuscarora, my dad's Kiowa and Comanche. I go back and forth from the res in New York to Phoenix. I go back and forth. I'm a psychologist, and I taught at OU for several years, and then my house was hit by a tornado 13 years ago next week. My house was hit by a tornado, so we left, and we moved back home to New York, and I get to borrow you guys just for a little while to talk about domestic violence and the cycle of violence. And you know what? I have probably like 300 slides, and as I was sitting here praying about it and admiring the chicken, I was thinking, I'm not even know if I'm gonna use my slides, because I don't know how. I struggled with making this talk to begin with because I wasn't sure. There are so many angles to approach it. There's a legal angle, there's a cultural angle, there's a spiritual angle, and I wasn't even sure how to go about it. And so I thought, well, let me just put my hands on the computer and just start typing stuff. And I sat in the panel this morning, and I don't know, I'm just rewriting it right now. So what I landed on was hope. So my 3 chocolate kids at home, Gracie, Parks, and Jack. Gracie's 18, she's in college. No, she's 19, she's gonna be a psychologist. Parks is 15, and he's really good at being 15. And Jack is 11, and he's my little mellow teddy bear. And those 3 chocolate kids at home, I don't want them to grow up in communities, in our native communities, where 4 out of 5 people, did you guys listen to that video? 4 out of 5 people have experienced domestic violence. And I look at my 3 chocolate kids and I feel it right now. I don't want them to have that. And us moving the needle within that is not going to happen by accident. It's not, we aren't going to wish that away. There are purposeful behaviors that we need to start doing in our communities, within myself, that we can start moving the needle. As I was listening to the panel earlier, several of them said that they had trouble maybe leaving the house sometimes. They had trouble going to work. And my friends, hear me say this. Let me get everyone's attention for the next 10 seconds. For the next 10 seconds. Trauma's end game in our communities is to shrink us. Trauma's end game is to have us sitting in our homes with the doors locked, hiding under the covers, and limiting, stripping us of sovereignty. That is trauma's end game. Healing, trauma is all about contraction and shrinking and limiting. And I know you don't want you or your kids or your grandkids to experience that. Healing is all about expansion. It's all about kicking the door down. It's all about potential. It's all about possibility. It's all about peace and sovereignty. So when I say sovereignty in a socio-cultural context, let me pause for a second. For 20 years as a psychologist, I have specialized in trauma, and how it affects the brain, and how it affects the behaviors, and how it strips us and strips us and strips us. And I'm tired of it, to be honest with you. We need a generation of people gathering together to create possibility and change. And I might get to one or two of my slides. We'll see what happens. But I'm gonna describe to you a little bit about how trauma, how this cycle of violence, which was instilled into our communities, that wasn't us. You know that wasn't us. For the next 30 minutes, my friends, if I say something that you agree with, just do like this. If I say something you disagree with, just do like this. I won't know the difference. Trauma, its job is to take away our sovereignty. So when I talk about sovereignty in a social cultural context, sovereignty is we're in charge of our language, we're in charge of our ceremonies, our finances, our government. That's social cultural sovereignty. But personal sovereignty in any given moment is, can I engage the capacity to walk out that front door? Personal sovereignty in any given moment is this thing that lives in my gut that makes my heart pound that I'm calling fear. Is that going to be bigger than me in this moment? And trauma's betting that it will be. But not until we, as healing communities, start doing things just a little bit differently, does a different neural pathway start to fire. I'll pare it down to just physiology, and we'll expand beyond that. Hey, maybe I'll get to one of my slides. All right, let's see what happens next. How do I fast forward my slide? Is there a thing? I'll go get that. You guys eat your chicken real quick. Thank you, brother. I'm back. I hope you finished your chicken because I'm back. All right, I got to go back and ask him how it works. How does it work? Go. There you go. So I speak to you today as a psychologist, but as a relative. I live in our communities. I live on the res in New York. I live in our communities. And our communities are unique in that we aren't just average people living in Tulsa with neighbors we don't know. My res at home is 2,000 people who have been there for generations and generations and generations. They share stories and cultural history and familial obligations and things like this. So when somebody changes, things change in a community. There's research out of Rensselaer University. Two things I want to cite. One is when you make a change, my friends, it affects people 3 degrees of separation away from you. When you start to become sovereign, when you start to pursue your own wellness and healing, your granddaughter's teacher's husband changes. Your son's Sunday school teacher's cousin's in-law, I don't know, that's kind of far, changes. 3 degrees of separation. How big is Stillwell? Steel whale. How big is Steel whale? If you get 30 people in Steel whale making change, and that gets out 3 degrees of separation, you are changing Stillwell. Now listen to this. A lot of people say, oh, we can't change this in our communities because it's so big, there's so much. Hear me say this right now. Give me another 10 seconds. It only takes 9% of a population to tip the balance. I need some of that right there. We only need 9% of a population, because people say, well, we need to get half the people on board. No. We need 9%. In that 9%, though, we need across genders, we need across ages, we need elders, we need youngers, we need leadership, and it's got to be consistent. It can't be an event. I just had 2 ideas. Did you guys hear them? Okay. I don't know where I was. 9% is where I was. It takes 9% of a population. So look at what I just laid down for you. You change things 3 degrees of separation away from you, 9% of a population. Look around this room. This is literally a community of change right now. I'm not just saying that to sound fluffy. I like hardcore facts. And I like to know the things that are occurring that make us change. I'm into that. Because when I see someone sitting across from me in my practice and they are distressed, they grew up in violence, they grew up with abuse, I can't sit here dishing out fluff. I gotta say, let's knock this thing out. Let's change things. Instead of running away from it, let's lean into it. I'm gonna keep going. All right. Can I go back? I don't think so. All right, let's just talk about this one then. So we are right now in the midst of our next pandemic. We are in the midst of our next pandemic, and it's behavioral health, it's mental health. We're in the throes of it right now. You heard the numbers from 1920 to 2020 to 2021. The numbers spiked. That's not a coincidence. Stress and trauma are cumulative. So if we're just barely white-knuckling it, and then you add a 3-year pandemic, I've met with so many people, phone calls from school superintendents and chiefs and clinic leaders and other psychologists saying, man, I just don't feel right. Something's going on with me. I've had my first anxiety attack. I'm having my first bout with depression. Now, if we don't have the internal tools to address this, we express it externally. Come on now. If we don't have the internal tools to address this, we express it externally. Look at the numbers in Oklahoma of the increased rates of drinking, smoking, hitting, using in the past 3 years. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. Drinking, hitting, smoking, using. Who gained the COVID-15? Raise your hand. I'm gonna raise one for me and another one for you big liars. Food, external tool, internal event. Drinking, external tool for an internal event. Smoking, external tool for an internal event. Hitting, an external tool for an internal event. In that first 6 months, people were locked in their homes with their abusers, who were stressed and had no outlet for it. Now, I said I'm going to focus on hope, and I want to do that. But I don't know how to change my hope slide. So I had a patient. She grew up in a domestic violence home situation. And she gets on. I had never said a word to her, and I was doing, so my telehealth company is called First Nations Telehealth. And you know how on Zoom, you can turn the camera on without turning the sound on, or you can turn the sound on without turning the camera on? She turned the sound on, but didn't turn her camera on. And she said, before she even turned her camera on, she said, "Are you Catholic?" Just yelled it. And I got all mirrors on her. I was like, dang. I said, no. When she turned her camera on, she said, good, because I was abused for years and years and years and years and years in Catholic school. She's in her 60s. She started getting abused physically and sexually, violently, at 5 years old. And so I thought, that's the rabbit hole we're going to go down. Let's do this. Let's run toward this together, you and me. You are my deal now. But every time she said it, thought about it, her body reacted. So she avoided. And just so we know, the more we avoid it, the more that body reaction has to crank it up to get our attention. The more we avoid it, the more it has to crank it up to say, why are you avoiding me? That's all physiology. That's the vagus nerve, that's the limbic system. So she avoided, and that whole session, we didn't talk about it. I just chased her around the whole time. Then we ended, and I thought, well, I don't know what happened there. She came back the next week. We had the exact same conversation. We had the same conversation for a month. And then I said to myself, I'm just going to show up. I'm going to show her what I'm about. Part of the healing, if you are engaging with somebody in healing, it's not so much what you're saying, but who you are being in the life of this person. So I would, every time she came on, I'd flip my computer on and we would just talk. Next 6 months went that way. And then she didn't turn her screen on again. She said, this is gonna get weird. Then she turned her screen on and it got weird. She said, when I was 5, one of the priests, and then she vomited. Threw up right there. And I said, and here's the truth. I don't need to know. What do I mean when I say that? Is if we could have thought our way out of it, we would have by now. She's having a physiological problem, not a psychological problem. I said, let's get this under control. Let's get this under control so you feel sovereign again. And she said, but I want to tell you. I said, okay. And she said, I wasn't, and she vomited again. And I said, let's just get some stuff under control first. Because hear me say this, are you ready? Are you ready? 10 seconds. The event is over. The trauma is in me. The event is over. The trauma is in me. And it's stored as a charge. And every time something nudges up against it, I have this survival response. And that survival response starts to become a bully in my life. So I don't go out of the house because there's too many triggers. There's too many things outside my doors. But you know what? There's things on TV and there's things in the living room, so I'll just stay in my bedroom. Here's what I want for my kids, and here's what I want for the folks that you work with. We are not ever going to make a trigger-free world. It's not going to happen. Because every single second, your limbic system, your vagus nerve is picking up on millions of different things. Every second. So rather than control this stuff, I want to make my kids sovereign. I want them to know that whenever they walk out the door, they have depth and breadth in their toolbox, that whatever comes along, they're going to punch it in the nose. That they are bigger than this. How do we end the cycle of violence? It starts with, and here's what I do clinically, it starts with not so much what do I think about it, but where is it? How does it feel? What does it do? And how do I start commanding that? We think about fear. Think about anger. Think about fear and anger. What do they feel like in you? Seriously, you pause for a second and think, what does fear and anger, so your stomach's tight, right? Your heart's beating fast. You're breathing shallow. You might be sweating. And we look contextually and we label that fear. But that somatic base is the same thing as when I'm at an OU football game and they're off 57-0. Not last season. So what we want to do is start working the bottom up and start healing, not dealing. We take, in our communities, we go from dealing to healing. And here's what's cool. I don't even know what slide I'm on. There's some things I want to share with you. So then like I said, I like to pare things down. What is this? What's occurring? I'm going to show you something cool. Okay, so I got this here. Can everyone see me okay still? I got this here. So we are electrical. That's just how God put us together, is we are electrical. And here, everyone see that? There's not a magic button. This is just me being all electrical, lighting that thing up. So if I come over here and she touches this, now why doesn't this light up? She's dead inside. I didn't say that, she said that. Okay. But we have to, if you know electricity, you have to close a circuit, right? So everyone touch fingers around this table. So what's cool about this is paring it down to understanding that how God put us together was to make sure that we live. And there was a big threat. This changes. The parts of my brain that are all about my survival change. My vagus nerve, which takes all this information from my body, sends it north of my brain, it all changes. And the ways that we get it back, the ways that we heal, hear me say this, give me 10 seconds. I don't even know what time it is. I'm all right. Are you ready? We heal in community. We heal in community. Just how we're put together, we suffer in silos because that's trauma's sweet spot. Trauma wants us to limit ourselves, shut down. That's what it wants. But when we kick that silo door open and we start engaging in well communities, I thought one of the panel people were brilliant in saying being around healthy people. That is one of the main things the vagus nerve responds to is, who are you around? Are they healing for you? Are they lifting you? The neural pathway, listen to this, 10 more seconds. The neural pathway for healing is paired with a neural pathway for being social. Isn't that cool? The neural pathway for healing is paired for the neural pathway for being social. Listen to me now, my friends. We as Native people are primed for that. We're perfectly suited for that. We live in tribal communities. We live in multi-generational homes. We live in clanship systems. We were raised in protective factors. Now, sometimes someone in those homes gets wounded, gets injured, and brings the trauma into the home. And that's when we got to make sure we have safety measures and personal wellness. Safety measures and personal wellness. So here's something really cool. This is just as me sucking up because we're Native. Everything we need for healing is found in our culture. I'm saying that again. Everything. Prayerfulness. Am I right? Spirituality. It's 300, but listen to this now. I am on a committee, I don't know, group, for suicide prevention nationally for our Native people. And it's founded kind of in a research out of Johns Hopkins that said culture is the #1 healing tool in Native communities, which is great. You know, as a Native person being so ethnocentric, I am down, like, what's up? That's what I want. But it's not just culture, it's the meaning of culture. It's the meaning of the relationship of your grandpa that taught you how to fish. It's the meaning of the auntie that taught you how to bead or dance. It's the meaning of mom teaching you how to make fry bread. It's the meaning, all these safe relationships, because you know people who practice culture that still struggle. So it's not just the behaviors of culture, it's the meanings of culture. And how we're in safe communities that the people in this room, the people that you work with, are doing the work that heals. Listen to this now, 10 more seconds. We do self-care so I can loan safety out to somebody. I'm going to say it again, that sounded smart. We do self-care in case someone needs to borrow it. And that is an ongoing, daily thing that we pack our toolbox so when we go out to Steel Wheel, when we go out into the community, we are loaded for bear. We have a box full of tools and wellness that we can loan out to people. Now listen to this. Are you ready? 10 more seconds. 20 seconds. The system doesn't heal until we are safe. The body, the mind, the brain, even the socio-cultural systems do not heal until we are safe. Are you ready for something cool? 10 more seconds. The body wants to get rid of the trauma. We just have to be good stewards of the process. Come on. I'm going to say it again. The body wants to get rid of the trauma. We just have to be good stewards of the process. Who are you being? Have you done self-care enough that you could loan that out? That's how we stop that cycle. I'm going to talk to you about 2 or 3 different things, then it's time to go already, crying out loud. Epigenetics. Epi, above. Genetic, the gene. The environmental influence on gene activation. So we're not using all of our genes, right? We're not using all of our DNA. I'm using the skinny legs one for sure, but also the big muscle one. We're not using all of our DNA. We're using the DNA to get us through the day, correct? We're using the DNA to get us through the day. So it was found that epigenetics, there's genetic scarring. So things that happen to it goes back 4 generations, they have found in most recent research. My dad's 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 dad. 4 generations. His hurt creates a genetic scar. The histone opens up during a traumatic event. A protein is squirted into the histone to remember this event, because how is this person going to talk to me in Tulsa in April of 2023? So that's squirted in the histone to say, be careful, Darryl. And so that's passed. Then that's tossed into the gene pool, and subsequent generations swim in the gene pool. And let's say it was abuse. So if each generation keeps abusing, then that just keeps flaring up. That keeps popping for them. But listen to me now. 10 seconds. If we dig in our heels and say, I'm not going to do that, this generation grows up without that gene popping. And so they learn something different than this generation. Well, I don't do that to my kids. That's crazy. Then different genes not only start to not pop, different genes start to fire. Because we're not just saddled with the injuries of the past. Listen to this, my friends, 10 seconds. We have everything that made our people strong and vibrant in our gene pool right now. Everything that made them great, that got you to work out miraculously, that we all get to be in this room today in April of 2023, which is unbelievable. It's a miracle. If you look back through history, one saber-toothed tiger bites somebody, you're not here today. It's a miracle that we all get to be in this room here today. So my kids, those empowered genes, listen to this now, don't pop until they need it. They don't pop until they need it. So my job as Daddy Bear for Gracie Parks and Jack Jack is to challenge them and scaffold them. To make sure that if they take the low road, they take the easy road, they don't have the need for their ancestors' gifts. But if they say, I'm going to lean into this and challenge myself, and Daddy Bear says, let's do this, hear me say this. Are you ready? My 3 kids at home today, at school today. Your grandkids, your children, are the strongest genetic native people that have ever lived. Come on. Your kids, your grandkids, my kids at home are the strongest genetic native people that have ever lived. And it's our role to look at who we are being in their lives, loan them that safety, give them that scaffolding so they're breaking cycles over and over and over again. Isn't that awesome? It's the last thing, then I might go. I don't know. I still have 299 slides. Zebras don't get ulcers. Did you know that? Have you ever thought about that before? Did you even care? Zebras don't get ulcers. So let's say a zebra's out in the outback. Do you know where zebras live? I don't know. Apparently a steakhouse. They're at the outback. And a lion sees the one that he wants. A lion sees the one that he wants. And he jumps up and says, oh, that's the one I want. He grabs the zebra. And just like you, just like me, that zebra has 3 responses: fight, flight, or freeze. And just so you know, trauma is in the freeze. It's the inability to use that electrical charge I showed you for what it was intended for. The event is over. The trauma's in me. It's stored in me, and then my job is to get rid of that. Not by running away from it, but by leaning into it. So the lion drags that zebra back and says, oh, I'm going to chow on this. But the lion, well, as he's driving, as he's dragging it back, there's this big endorphin rush in the zebra. So the zebra's pupils dilate, heart's barely pumping, it just looks like a dead zebra. And so the lion drags it back to the tall grass and says, I'm going to chow on this zebra. But then, you know, the lion's got such a big ego. You saw Lion King, right? There's whatever. I guess it says, I don't need dead stuff. I am the king of the outback. So it lets it go. And that zebra jumps up because it's scanning to survive. And it says, get up, get up, get up. And here's where it becomes interesting for us, my friends. Is that zebra runs back to the herd. Runs back to the herd. The herd opens up. And the zebra runs into the middle. And they all close around it. They run to the middle where it's wounded. It runs where it is safest. It runs where it's protected. It runs where healing can happen. And it goes in there and it shakes. It gets rid of that charge. And then it starts living its life. Start doing zebra stuff. Hanging out at the watering hole with the yak. You don't know what they do either. The point is, it healed in safety and it healed in community. I'm going to say it again, it sounded smart. It healed in safety and it healed in community. Just as a reminder, my friends, it only takes 9% of a population. We create change 3 degrees of separation from us, and it's from us leaning into it together and becoming communities of healing. Now I'm supposed to do an advertisement. I have a podcast called The Singing Psychologist. You guys don't notice I'm a huge rock star. I have a podcast called The Singing Psychologist that talks about more of these things. But just in closing, thank you, my friends. I don't say this casually. My first job after getting done my internship was at a domestic violence shelter for women. That was my first job. So I don't say this casually or lightly. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you're going to do with this next generation that stops the cycle. And let's take care of each other. Thank you.
Let's hear another round of applause for Darryl Tonemah.